First of all, if you'd like to give it up for another first-time attendee at TF Nation, Mr. Steve White.
Thanks for coming.
So, I'm sure there's at least 4 or 5 people in this room want me to start talking about Steve's amazing paleo art, but before we get to that, Steve's had a wonderful, varied career over the course of several years. I'll try not to put a 0 on the end of any of them to spare your blushes, but I thought I'd like to take a wee tour through that first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I started at Marvel UK on 1st of April 1986. So easy day to remember. So I started in what was called the junior department. It was essentially very young kids stuff. I started out as a colour separator, which was the absolute lowest point in your career at that point. It was part of the very ethereal way of colouring comics at that point. And yeah, and then fairly soon after I moved up to assistant editor on Acorn Green. At that point I was actually colouring comics. I was colouring the kids stuff I was doing, but the very first comic I had my name in was Care Bears, like May 1986 at some point. I was doing Care Bears, Get Along Gang, and Acorn Green, these sort of like toy ranges that have kind of vanished into oblivion now, except Care Bears. Yeah, and then I moved to what was called the Boys Action Team as assistant editor on Action Force. At which point I was also asked to start colouring Transformers when they moved from fully painted to mechanical colouring. And I don't think they won't mind me saying too much, but the Boys Action Team were very snobbish about the comics. They didn't talk to me because I was one of the junior team until I was asked to go to colour Transformers. So yeah, and at that point I also lucked out and started on Action Force.
In terms of, so just because I'm sure there's a few people here who have no idea how comics were coloured back then, because obviously Photoshop changed the game. So you said you started off as a separator. So
yeah.
What did that entail? So people could know why.
Okay, just like bear with me because it's a ridiculously complicated process. But so the colorist, say like what I was doing on Transformers, you were credited as a colorist. You did a color rough. You did essentially, it was a photocopy of the actual comic art that you colored in with markers. And basically the way it worked was the mechanical colouring was it was called like the 9-sheet method, and it was you had all the colours were broken down into yellow, magenta and cyan. Okay, so and each colour was broken down into 25, 50 and 100%, and mixing those colours made a colour. So for instance, like Optimus Prime, most of my remembrance of Transformers was the percentage of their colour. So Optimus Prime was like 100 red, 100 yellow, and his head was 100 blue, 25 red. And Cyclonus was 25 red, 25 blue. And anyway, so you had the 9 different, so 100 yellow, 50 yellow, 25 yellow, etc. And what a colour separator did was fill in on an acetate overlay of the artwork. Like say they would do all the 25% yellow, then all the 50 yellow, then all the 100 yellow, 25 blue, 50 blue, 100 blue, and so on. So you would do 9 sheets of acetate overlay, and the mixing of those overlays made the colours. So yeah, it seems it was like incredibly complicated, and you use these sort of like acetate pens that like gave off the worst fumes. You know, it was like the colour. We had a specific room called the colour separation room, and it stank of like alcohol, like ethanol, because these pens, and that was kind of like the lowest rung. You know, that you kind of like came in at that point, and then if the separation room into like the kids' room or the boys' action room, you know. So yeah, that was, you know, as a colorist, what you were doing, what you were being credited for was just doing the photocopied colours. It was like the colour guide for each page.
So the junior job seems like the most difficult job.
Yeah, it was like one of those things that also, it was like at a time when, you know, it was a menial job. It was like, but we gave it out freelance as well. So you would have these people coming in and out of the office to pick up, you know, their set of acetate overlays and the what was called a PMT of the artwork, a photomagnetic transfer, which you would also have to do. It was like using like these big old cumbersome machines to transfer like a copy of the artwork onto this particular paper. So,
but you obviously made your escape into the boys' action.
Yeah.
And at that point, did you treat the separators as the lowest of the low?
Yeah, they were scum of the earth, you know. And because you would have to, one of your jobs as the assistant editor was go through each page to make sure that they hadn't missed anything or they hadn't gone over the line, and it was like, yeah, it was like amazingly complicated and like become this little very arcane, you know, talking to people about it, they can't, how did that even work, you know? It was like a lot of, it was very work intensive compared to what you can do today.
And obviously you were working in the UK comic scene, which was a weekly market for the most part, so
yes,
deadlines would be quite intensive.
Deadline was king, deadline was everything, you know. I mean, when you were doing a weekly, I think we worked on average about, like with say the comic strips, you were averaging about 2 months ahead, and each issue was like about a month ahead, but you'd get to August, and then the annuals would come in, which was a boom time because it meant for all the editors you got loads of freelance work. Like you would get the annual of the comic that you were working on, and there were always other annuals that were coming in and out. But it also meant there would be a flurry of other work. You know, all the assistant editors, most people at Marvel were freelancing on something. It was really one of the ways they got you into the job. It's like you'd go through your interview and it's like, it's terrible pay, but you can freelance, you know. So everybody was either a letterer or a colorist, or they were doing color separations, you know, you tried to get out of that as quickly as possible. So yeah, coloring was what I used to do freelance, but there was the writing and that kind of stuff.
Now, back in the days, most comics people, now obviously with internet and social media, you can put a name to a face for most comic creators, but back then, you'd have some credits and that's about it, but
yeah,
you were probably technically the most recognised member of Marvel UK thanks to Lou Stringer.
Yeah. The semi-automatic Steve thing was like a joke by Richard Starkins, who was my boss at the time, because I was known for my interest in military hardware, which is why I ended up on Action Force. Because I used to write all the sort of features and this kind of thing, and I was known for having this. So when they wanted to do Combat Colin and they were looking for a sidekick, yeah, next thing I know, there's semi-automatic Steve, you know, and I found myself like, yes, cast into the role of, you know, Colin's trusty sidekick.
So all that fame, but absolutely no royalties or
No, you know, I was like, well, you know, it seems to be the way of things.
So obviously you're branching it right in a lot with Action Force, and so Marvel UK at the time was very license oriented. Obviously some of your later career you worked with a lot of licenses. What was it like at the time in terms of approvals and what have you, because you were dealing with telephone and fax, maybe telex if you're lucky, as opposed to now where it's email or what have you, so it's much quicker.
Yeah, I mean, I think even then we had like FedEx or whatever, but it was mainly fax. But the thing was, like, there was like virtually no approvals process. There was like, we pretty much did what we wanted. There seemed to be like there was one occasion when we got in trouble, and it was on Thundercats. And it was a story called Rampage, and Tigra essentially kind of got rabies. And in the story, he hits the Wily kittens. And, okay, was it Tommy? I can't remember, whoever it was on Thundercats. You know, we would send this stuff in, you know, just as lip service, but they saw this and they went mental. And it was the only time that I remember, like, I wasn't actually editing, I wasn't involved with Thundercats at that point, but I remember them being dragged down to the managing director's office to sort of stand tall before the man about what the hell were you doing, you know? But it was like, yeah, generally, there was like, on Action Force Transformers, Hasbro were like just happy to let us get on with it. I don't think we were ever, I have no recollection of it ever being sort of called out on anything that we ever did.
So you kind of were a job in freelance on pretty much all of Marvel UK's titles at the time in terms of, because obviously Action Force is probably your most recognisable in terms of credits, but the Ghostbusters,
yeah, I mean Ghostbusters was like, that was the one that was the big, you know, from a freelancer's point of view, that was the money spinner, because there was 3 stories a week, so they were generating so much material. It was one of the great things about Marvel UK, was that we were doing like what we used to call sawn-off storytelling, because it was like, we needed creators, we needed like as many writers and artists as we could get. And you could, you know, you see someone with like, it was the weird thing at the time. The great thing was that people would just turn up in the office. They would turn up in reception with their portfolio and ask if someone would come and look at their portfolio. Once it got out that they could do this. So it's actually like how like people like Brian Hitch, Dougie Braithwaite, Liam Sharp, these guys just turned up with their portfolios. And then it would be like, you know, reception call, you know, some kid's here with their portfolio and it's like, who's least busy that can go down and take a look at it. And so they, yeah, you know, if they were good, you could give them a script. But they didn't need to do much of anything in terms of, you know, all that they had everything they needed to tell the story. They had the creators, they had the setting, the environment, so they could just get to it. And it was a great, you know, and because it was weekly, you know, it meant that they had to sort of learn fast. You either got with it or you kind of quit, you know. So a lot of them learn very fast, you know. It's why I think, looking even now, so many of the people that work at Marvel UK are still very sort of big name comic people, because they were given this environment to learn very quickly.
And obviously the intensive deadline, as you said, it needs to go to print on this date, it was not ready.
Yeah. And it was also like why everybody was in London, because it was like Marvel's offices, and you know, everybody would come to London to make their fortune, like it's like some Dickensian story, you know. And yeah, and you know, it meant that if someone was ill or they missed or whatever, you could pick up the telephone and say, can you come in the office now to get a cover brief or to get a script or whatever, and then turn it around in a couple of days or overnight, as was often the case, you know.
So Marvel UK kind of takes a sea change in the 90s and sort of moves away, or slowly moves away from the license and books to start to do its original content.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like at that point in terms of the office?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of let go from Marvel UK because I had a differing view with the management over the direction we should be taking. The general view seemed to be put Wolverine in everything, you know? And I was just like, we have much better creators than that, you know? And so yeah, I kind of went my separate ways. At that point, yeah, it was a very different environment, you know. Computer games came in, I think started really impacting on comics in about like 1990. You could see the sales kind of like dropping, like the American comics industry had imploded, and it just felt like the sword of Damocles was hanging over the head of the British comics industry. So yeah, that was of course the point when I chose to go freelance. It's just like, yeah, that seems like a good idea.
So you transition away from some Marvel and you end up at 2000 AD and, well, Fleetway Editions, you were the publisher of this, and what we'd argue is probably the successor of the UK market to Transformers, which was Sonic the Comic. I'm assuming there's a couple of fans of that in here. But for those of not an age, Transformers was the gateway comic to 2000 AD, to Marvel US, DC. It was the from the kiddie comic to the mid to going on, Sonic kind of took that spot.
I mean, that was one of the sort of strange things. It was like we felt we were the like teaching ground for 2000 AD. You know, a lot of the Transformers artists, action force artists would all sort of cut their teeth with us, and then they'd all sold off to 2000 AD, and they were just like, oh, great, thank you, but you just had to sort of accept the fact that it went with the territory. But the other thing was that many of the editors went from Marvel to Fleetway as it was then. So my assistant editor became editor on Sonic. So there was a certain amount of nepotism, you know. It was, and it was the same with 2000 AD. I ended up writing Rogue Trooper because one of my friends and one of the writers that used to work with me ended up as Tharg on 2000 AD, John Tomlinson. So when they needed a new writer on Rogue, he thought, I know the very man for this, you know. So, and then, yeah, and at the same time I picked up a load of work working on Sonic, as I found one of my sort of legacy things was Echo the Dolphin, which I drew, which, you know, at the time was great, you know, and so many of these things, it's even like being here, you know, Transformers was it was a great thing, it was fun for me to work on because it was different, it wasn't Care Bears, you know. It was a chance to actually do something quite creative, we could do some funky things, you know. But it was a strange thing that as I said earlier, like Transformers to me is percentages of colour, you know. It's like often I would get the artwork without any dialogue. You know, that would be added, the word balloons would be added after I coloured it. So all you'd get was like guessing what the story was at that point. You know, but yeah, Sonic was great. It was, you know, it was a lot of fun to do. I loved, because it was hand colouring. It was back to sort of hand colouring. I was using markers. Yeah, and it was just really good fun. I just didn't realise that it would have the sort of impact that it did. So.
Otherwise, you would have kept your original art.
Yes. My worst, the great curse of my life is that I have thrown everything away. You know, it was like I was in you know, when you're moving house and that kind of thing, and you've got piles of artwork and cover-ups and this kind of thing, and you're like, why am I lugging this stuff around? Nobody's interested in this anymore. So yeah, you end up chucking it away, and then 20 years later, there's like, oh, have you got, you know, you're on the internet and people are saying, have you got your artwork? Have you got any of your originals? And you're like, no, I threw it all away, you know. So yeah, I said to my niece, I have a niece who's like, you know, 20 years younger than me, and she's just getting into art, and she asked for any advice, and I said, do not throw anything away. Keep everything, because you never know when it's going to like come back into fashion, you know.
So, with Sonic and obviously Sega, again, was there any approvals again with that, or were they hands off?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that was like, I was purely freelance at that point. I don't think there was ever any kind of problems. I never had to like correct anything. You know, it was like when I did the Echo pages, you know, I did some quite funky stuff on there. I did some sort of quite psychedelic stuff, and I was never ever sort of pulled up on it. So I figured that they were quite happy just to let us get on with it, you know.
So when did you sort of transition out of comics into, obviously you did end up at Titan eventually, but obviously late 90s became even worse for comics in the UK for
that was
read them at the time. That
was kind of my wilderness years, I think of them as, because like 1993 was when I went freelance, and that was when I started work on Sonic, and I was writing for 2000 AD, and I was drawing dinosaurs for a part work, the Orbis dinosaur part work, which is like my paleo legacy. I was doing these centre spreads that were shot in 3D. And again, they were one a week. It was like unbelievable amount of work. And that was fantastic. And when I first got freelance, they said, well, we've got about 14, we think we'll do about 14 of these, we'll see how it goes. I ended up doing something like 350, you know, and it was unreal, and it was like, those were halcyon days. I was loaded, I learned to scuba dive, I was traveling the world, it was brilliant, and drawing dinosaurs and writing for 2000 AD, how good could it get? And then everything just collapsed. It was, you know, the Orbis thing came to an end, 2000 AD, like John left, the new editor came in, didn't want to use me, everything just kind of like vaporized, and it was also a valuable lesson to me, like, don't be a one-trick pony. You know, I was the dinosaur guy, you know, it's something that terrifies me even now. But yeah, so I ended up working in a bookshop for like 5 years. But I was inking Wonder Woman at the time for a guy, artist named Andy Lanning, who some of you might know from his Marvel UK stuff, writing, working on Ghostbusters and writing the Sleaze Brothers, but yeah, and then Simon Furman, God bless him, got me a job at Titan in 2003 as graphic novels editor, and that kind of was, I sort of came out of the wilderness and was back in comics. You know, I was like doing, yeah, I was actually working on like the Titan Transformers collections, amongst other things. So yeah, it was like, you know, as the Eagle saying, in Hotel California, you can check out, but you can never leave. You know, it's that thing of these things. Just if you've done them, they stay with you. So yeah.
And obviously with on time with the graphic novels, it's all reprints, it's kind of a done deal. But then 2007, the live action movies happened, and Transformers gets a comic again, and they call on you.
And that was very weird. That was you know, we'd heard that there was going to be this Transformers comic, the movie, and then one day my boss, Chris Tether, kind of called me into his office and said, "How'd you fancy editing Transformers again?" You know, and I was like, "Okay." You know, and we get the new comic, but it was that thing at that point, we knew nothing about it, and I got sent over to Hasbro's offices in West Drayton and put into this room where you could not have, I wasn't allowed my phone, we weren't allowed any kind of recording material, not even a pen to read the script. And it was like, I could read the script, but I couldn't make any notes on it, couldn't say anything about it, you know, and then that was like, okay, and then somehow I had to explain to Simon what it is he could write, you know, because it was obvious if we were going to do a new Transformers comic, I was going to get Simon to write it again, you know. And we got Jeff to do the first issue, even though he kicked and screamed, he really didn't want to do it. I had to get him drunk in the park to make him do it. And then he hated Optimus Prime because he was all spiky and horrible, and you know, it's like, this isn't my Optimus Prime, it's just draw the damn thing, Jeff, just, you know, you're going to get played, you know. And, but that was weird because it was, you know, we did that because we wanted to appeal to the fan base. We thought there would be the fans out there that would excite Jeff, getting the old gang back together again, you know. But it was, you know, mainly kids who were buying the comic, you know.
Not a bad thing, to be fair.
No, but we were also, I mean, the problem with comics now, sorry, this is one of the views that, you know, people that still work in the British comics industry, the biggest problem is the fact that comics are nothing more than a delivery system for the cover mount. There was like, we realised fairly quickly there's little by way of brand loyalty. And so it was very difficult, you know, to know, you know, the direction to go in. You know, I mean, we in the end it was just like, you know, we're just going to do it. Hasbro seemed happy. You know, we didn't really have many problems with the strip. There were many political problems that are probably not. This isn't the place to talk about it, but yeah.
At the bar later on after a couple of days.
Yeah, it was kind of like one of those very strange times. We were kind of caught in the middle of this political gunfight. You know, but yeah. And it's interesting, like a guy came up to me today who said, "Oh my God, that comic was my Transformers. I absolutely loved it." And it's easy to forget when you're working on it that it's going to impact someone somewhere, And it was, it was fun. It was great to be able to sort of like do this stuff again. It was just a very different environment.
And obviously the presentation of the comics, as you mentioned, the cover mount's a big thing, but also there's a lot more sort of licensed art thrown in. There's a lot less original content, so I'm assuming budgets being what they are quite, this is the maximum original content you can afford.
And it was also things like we had a very basic style guide, so the fact that, there's only so much we can tell you, there's only so much we can give you. So it made it very difficult. You had like one of the characters, but you had no shot of him from behind. So it's just like, what does he look like? I have no idea. We don't have that in the style guide, So it's just like you're having to adapt to like situations like that.
So now we can get on to move back a little bit for the paleo art a little bit. Is you actually dipped your waters a little bit earlier with Dinosaurs: A Celebration. To call back one of your last.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. That was like a weird thing. That was just like I was lucky because. When we were at Marvel UK, we had very close ties with Marvel US. We were all like friends. The editors would come over for trips to Marvel UK, which they thought was like the Wild West. About Marvel UK, Marvel US's office was like in this big skyscraper in New York, and they big open plan. They come to this sort of like dump in like Bayswater in West London, surrounded by prostitutes and curry houses, and they would be like, wow, but they loved it, it was like so different for them. But we became really good friends with them, and two of my friends at Marvel US, Carl Potts, who was a writer, artist, and was a big editor in the States, and a woman named Carol Kalish, who was the special editor, and she was a paleontologist. Many paleontologists, there seems to be this sort of like Venn diagram of, as I discussed with Mike today, but yeah, there's a weird thing about dinosaurs and comics, especially like Transformers, as you guys know. And she had actually been trained by a very prominent paleontologist named Stephen Jay Gould. So when I came up with the concept of Dinosaurs: A Celebration, which was basically a comic strip about each family of dinosaurs, and it was like great, and they gave me a budget, and off I went. But it was a very limited budget, and it was like anybody who could draw dinosaurs or had ever drawn a dinosaurs or might be interested in drawing dinosaurs, getting that together. And so we were lucky to sort of get that. But one of the best things was that we did a signing for it at the Natural History Museum, and we got it was like a huge comic signing. I mean, it was like really big name comic artists, people who I had twisted their arms into doing me a cover and this kind of thing. And, various sort of paleontologists and anybody who was involved. And it ran over by like about 2.5 hours. It was just hugely successful, And I have very fond memories of being able to do that.
I do remember seeing it at the press at the time, and it's
we were in time out. I can't believe it.
So obviously was that sort of piqued your interest in terms of going for the Orbis gig after that?
No, the Orbis thing was just blind luck. That was because Jurassic Park, like 1993, anybody who could draw a dinosaur was like going to find themselves busy because Orbis launched it, and at the time a friend of mine had gone to them with their portfolio because she had done some stuff for me on Celebration. And she called me and said, they're looking for people who can draw dinosaurs. And I was just getting ready to go freelance, so I went over with my portfolio. They offered me, the spreads, and the rest was prehistory,
Oh, come on, it's worth more of a go than that. So,
thank you.
Tell your waitress.
I'll be here for the next hour.
So, in terms of as you mentioned something earlier, you were kind of known for the interest in military hardware and that. Was that before the dinosaurs? I know the dinosaurs came first, no one correct me. Before someone does. But had that become known, or was that sort of...
No, that was like something that was within Marvel. It was just because I happened to be, you know, I would correct them on things and that kind of thing, and they would just like, oh, you're one of those, are you? You know? I mean, that was mainly through my love, again, of comics. It was like I used to read all the sort of war comics and like Battle and Action and like the Air Race Picture Library stuff. That kind of piqued my interest.
So the love of dinosaur, where did that start? Early childhood?
That was like the first thing I ever drew with dinosaurs. My mum still has the books, which are like engraved from me, sort of tracing over them, you know. And so dinosaurs, yeah, that was always like, that was the thing that I kind of grew up on, you know. And it nearly got quashed by Star Wars, you know. Dinosaurs have become a bit boring, and then, you know, you had what was called the dinosaur renaissance in the sort of late 70s, and that kind of just like reinvigorated my love. So yeah, and that was when I kind of started getting into it, and I think through that you then had Jurassic Park, and you know, everything kind of evolved from there.
So what are your thoughts about, obviously, because we know over the years that various dinosaurs that we thought were actually dinosaurs weren't, because paleontologists have gotten better.
Yeah, I mean,
it's corrected the mistakes of certain archaeologists.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the thing. It's like, oh my god, I had like for a period, it was like many people knew Spinosaurus from Jurassic Park 3, and you know, it's one of those ones that is like, you know, there's no point in drawing it, because probably by the time you've penciled it and started the inks, someone's put out a new paper that says, no, it wasn't like that, it was actually like this. So you're like, okay. But yeah, and you're literally back to the drawing board. So, you know, yeah, it's, you know, we have but it's like when some of the books I've worked on, you realise that it's an inbuilt redundancy. You know, by the time that the book has come out, it's already going to be out of date because something has come along and changed that.
So, and again, for anyone who has picked up your art over the years, your books at the event, how long did it take you to do some of those pieces? Because I looking at all of our talent artists, and then looking at some of yours, I can I get a guess? That will take Nick about 8 hours to do. Then I'll look at a couple of your pictures and go, how many months?
I mean, the joke is, it's like, it's in the wrist action, you know, it is literally, you literally are like a sewing machine. It's like, I don't really do any penciling. When I was working in comics, you realise that inking has a tendency to flatten out artwork. Like, bad inking can destroy good pencils. And when I was sort of doing my own work, I kind of would do very loose pencils, and it's a matter of building the confidence in the inking. You end up doing the penciling with the inking, because I wanted to sort of keep that sense of momentum and dynamism. So, I mean, yeah, it can look complicated, but it's just all in the line work. So, you know, the longest I've done was about like one of the pieces I did took me 2 months. But that's really exceptional. Generally, it's sort of like 3-4 days work, you know.
And I hope you've kept the original?
Yes.
Yeah. So, what I'd like to do, before I throw the floor out to question, I'm going to go back a little bit, because there's one little bit, because you did Road Trooper, which at the time I think was one of the most thankless strip assignments, because for anyone who doesn't know 2008, Road Trooper was a very popular character in the 80s, who then got rebooted with a different incarnation in the 90s, which suddenly fell from favour, and I believe you were just asked to tie everything up.
Yes, that was one of the things that, you know, I was like asked to do Road Trooper. Brilliant. I loved Road Trooper, you know, and then they were like, can you tie up the continuity somehow? It was like what was called War Machine. And so, you know, I went with what I know. I went with Jurassic Park, when I was just like Jurassic Park 2. You know, when we said Isla de Webbler was the island, well, there's another island, you know? So I just said, well, yeah, so there's New Earth in Road Trooper, but there's also another, you know, planet where...
Newer Earth.
Yeah. And so and then I just had to sort of figure out a way of tying the two together, and it was like, it was a pretty thankless task. So, it was like one of those ones you were never going to please all the people all the time, so, you just had to roll with it.
So I think now's a good time to open the floor to any questions. I see one hand there, and the black t-shirt glasses. Do I have a mic runner?
You then. Yes, you.
This is kind of a weird question. In the last two issues of I've always wondered this. In the last two issues of the Titan Revenge of Fallen comic, the plotline was Wheelie betrayed the Autobots in a way that left at least one of them dead, and then Dead End ate him in the next. Was there some sort of thing, because did somebody down the line miscommunication that he was going to be a Dark of the Moon? Because he turns up alive well with the Autobots in Dark of the Moon, or was this something that happened, or was it just it was a fun story?
I'll be honest with you, I have absolutely no memory of that. That was at the time. I think I was senior editor, and a lot of the stuff that you did just was, it was like, you do it and it moves on, and I absolutely, I'll be honest and say I have no memory of that, so I really can't help you, I'm really sorry.
But also, Starscream letter page was really fun.
That was, okay, I loved, that is something that I remember doing Starscream, and doing Starscream Stars was like one of my favourite things,
My favourite one, my favourite one was Saturn is behind you. No, Saturn, not Satan.
It was like, I used to love doing jokes like that. I don't know if are any of you familiar with The Onion?
Yeah.
I used to love The Onion, and their astrology page used to make me weep. So when we started doing that, I am going to do I'm going to do an astrology page like The Onion, but with Starscream, And I just wanted him doing the letters page because I thought he was the perfect character to do it, It's like, you can be abusive to the readers because you're hiding behind, the character of Starscream.
So there's another question. Yep.
This has been fascinating, and kind of really varied career. Seems like kind of a common renaissance man of the kind that is really. Thank you. You seem like kind of a comics renaissance man of a kind that's very rare these days in the industry, and I'm wondering how you think of yourself. Like when you have cause to write a one-line bio, what do you put down? Do you put that I'm an editor, I'm an artist, or?
I actually see myself as it's like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. If you're familiar with the guys that are always in the wrong place at the right time. But I think I have really been lucky in the sense that I have generally stumbled from one thing to the other. It was never a particular career path. I've always just been, I started out at Marvel and I had it was great, and it gave me lots of opportunities to write, But because of that meant that I ended up writing Rogue Trooper because one of my friends went on to become Tharg, and I ended up working on Sonic because one of my assistant editors was editor on Sonic, and these things, working with Simon on, in Marvel meant that when he went to Titan, he was like, when they said, we need a graphic novels editor, and he's like, I have the very man. So a lot of it is, just is always who being in the right place at the right time. I mean, if I was to write a bio, it would just be, it would literally be editor/artist, or artist/editor, depending what I was writing for. But.
Hello, Steve.
Hello.
Thank you for coming to TFCon.
My pleasure. That's
You should. Size of the t-shirt.
And I wanted to ask, of all of the paleo art they've done, regardless of paleo accuracy, what's been your favourite favorite species to draw?
I guess, I am like, Sam Neill's character in Jurassic Park in the Triceratops was always my favourite, even like, with the Dinobots, it's like, no, there's only one, So anything that I can do with Triceratops, I love doing. I think the one that I was probably most proud of was the wading T-Rex that I did, which was the first piece of artwork that I did in lockdown.
That's the next video on
Because the other thing that kind of ties me to Transformers was that I was editor on the Hachette artwork. I was editor on the Transformers Ultimate Collection. It was one of those things that were like, you did Transformers. So once again, me and Simon ended up working on that. But after I was, we went into lockdown and I was at home and I was like, what do I fancy drawing? And in 1997 I had drawn for a dinosaur A to Z, Tyrannosaurus. And they gave me a list of dinosaurs, here's Tyrannosaurus, and I was like, what do I do? I'm kind of sick of drawing Tyrannosaurus doing terrible things to something. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to do a swimming T-Rex, I'm going to do it wading across a river. And it was really, it's like one of those pieces that kind of haunted me. So when I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to do, I thought, well, I'm just going to reinvent that one. And it turned into this sort of big thing, but it's the great thing about social media is that it really gives you a gauge in popularity on something, and people just went nuts over that,
Absolutely stunning, it's one of my favorites.
Thank you, and it did actually give me a link to Prehistoric Planet, which I was very happy about, because the scientist, the paleontologist, contacted me after I posted that and said how much for the original, and I literally just sold it. So I had the print and I sent him a print, and then when all the advanced material came out about Prehistoric Planet, which was the swimming T-Rex, was the main image, and he contacted me and said, have you been seeing all the Prehistoric Planet stuff? And I was like, yeah, because everybody has been copying, saying, Steve, have you seen this? It's and he said, while I was writing that, your print was on the wall, and I was, yes, So yes, I was very touched. Thank you.
Hello, Steve again.
Hello.
Just question, if you could make a Dinobot, if you were allowed to make one, what dinosaur would you make?
I think Mike covered this. I kind of liked what he said. I like Therizinosaurus. I think it's such a bizarre looking dinosaur. It's like one of those ones that, trying to sort of reconstruct is really difficult because you just think this looks so weird. How could this have moved, But yeah, I like a Margosaurus. I don't know if you know Margosaurus. It's basically a sow-necked sauropod. It looks like a brontosaurus with two Dimetrodon cells on his neck. It's really weird and I love it. So yeah, just to be different, I'll go with the Margosaurus.
My favorite dinosaur, thank you, Steve.
My pleasure.
Any advice for someone looking to get into paleo art?
It depends what you want to do as a career. If you want to draw dinosaurs for fun and hopefully make a living at it, don't be a paleo artist. What I think you define yourself, most paleo artists who are serious paleo artists are the people that work for National Geographic. It's their artwork that you see on an academic paper where they're doing the illustration of the reconstruction. But someone like me, although I get called a paleo artist, there's a scientist named Mark Whitten, and he defined paleo art. He said, it's either paleo art or artwork influenced by paleontology. And I sort of think I'm the latter. I draw dinosaurs and I love drawing dinosaurs and other prehistoric stuff, and I do it to the best of my ability and as accurately as possible. But I wouldn't consider myself someone who would like work for National Geographic. I think you can make a pretty good career just doing the sort of artwork influenced by paleontology and if you want to do it, the best way is you've got to be on social media. There are reams of people out there drawing dinosaurs, I would say for fun, but they tend to be really humorless. They're like very, very serious because they're fans, they're serious fans, and so they hate anything that doesn't look right. But it is by far the best way to get out there. Is like get part of the paleontology scene. There are things that if you want a really good to follow someone, follow tetrapod zoology, tetzu.com. That's paleontologist Darren Naish, and he is very much on the zeitgeist. He's on the cusp between real paleontology and pop art paleontology. And he runs a convention every year called Tetzu, and it's a great meeting place for people that want to do this kind of stuff. So I would really recommend that. And just stay in touch with what's hot and what's not. Usually when someone announces like a new dinosaur, you can run a sweepstake who's going to be the first artist to get a picture out of it.
So I think we've got time for one more question. Do we have any more? Oh. To be honest, I should probably have just gone up and handed you my mic, rather than mic running down from the back. I feel bad now.
Alright, one more. Going back to your time leaving Marvel UK, what characters should they have used instead of Wolverine?
Well, at the time, the argument I was having was that, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the way that comics are, but there was Vertigo Comics, which was DC Comics' it was kind of their what I would call adult line. It was much more ethereal. It had Preacher, TV shows that you're probably familiar with now, Preacher, Swamp Thing, Doom Patrol, and these were really serious. Most of them were being written. It was the second British invasion, what they called it. It was all these British comic creators who many of them had started at Marvel UK, moved on to 2000 AD, and then had gone to the States and become huge successes. They were reinventing comics. And I thought Marvel UK could be the bastion of that kind of comic line. But my boss disagreed and thought we should be just doing knockoff superhero stuff. So yeah, that was kind of why we decided to sort of go our separate ways.
Well, thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for giving us your time this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't want to say, I think it's still open. If you want to come and buy something.
Yes, so make it quick because the trader hall closes in 12 minutes, so run now, and we'll be back in 12 minutes for Susan Blue's second panel of the weekend. So thank you very much, everyone. And
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike, for being the most qualified mic runner of the weekend.